Welcome back. Today I have a special guest here. Our guest that I'm going to be interviewing, his name is Drew Manning. He is a New York Times bestselling author of the book Fit to Fat to Fit and is best known for his Fit to Fat to Fit experiment that went viral online where he gained and lost 75 pounds on purpose. He's been featured on shows like Dr. Oz, Good Morning America, and so many more. Drew also has a very successful podcast called The Fit to Fat Experience that has over 1.7 million downloads. He's known as the Keto Guy. His online 60-day keto program has over 200,000 downloads, and because of his message of living a vulnerable and authentic life, Drew has helped thousands of people learn to live a healthy lifestyle and completely transform their lives. Drew, thank you so much for being on the show today. Glad to have you.
Enoch, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love sharing your story with my students, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the show to talk about your journey, and I'm really excited about today.
Same here.
So for context's sake, and for those who don't know anything about you or your book yet, could you briefly describe the big idea behind your book, how it started and what it's about?
Yeah, so let's back up to about 2009-ish. At that time, I got certified as a personal trainer because health and fitness have always kind of been a passion of mine because I grew up in a family of 11 brothers and sisters, and we all played sports. So I grew up playing American football and wrestling. So being active was a big part of my lifestyle growing up. So I was always in shape. And so here I was, someone who had never been overweight a day in my life, trying to help people who were overweight pretty much most of their lives, right? And in my mind, it seemed so simple and easy to just eat healthy food and go to the gym. Like I couldn't understand why my clients struggled to stay consistent with the workouts and the meal plan, and I would get frustrated with them. And one of my clients one day told me, he's like, Drew, you don't understand how hard it is for people like me to lose weight because for you, it's always been easy and that's all you know. And when he said that, for some reason, I kind of, I took it to heart and I was like, you know what, you're right, man. I don't understand why so many people struggle with this. It seems so easy in my mind just to do it, right? And that day got me thinking of like, okay, what can I do to gain a better understanding? And for whatever reason, the idea of getting fat on purpose, I know it's crazy. It sounds crazy. It made sense in my mind. And it almost felt like a calling for me to do this crazy experiment where I was going to intentionally gain weight. And so fast forward to 2011, I pulled the trigger on this idea. And the idea was for 6 months, no exercise and eat a standard American diet.
Wow.
And the idea was to gain as much weight as I could in 6 months and document the whole journey. And before you know it, the story went viral and went on a bunch of TV shows and had my own TV show for 2 seasons and wrote a book, which became a New York Times bestseller. And so there was a lot of things that came from that experience. And it was so humbling, and it was one of the hardest things that I've ever done. It helped me realize how wrong I was. And so I think sometimes in life, there's things that come into your life that humble you, that totally shift your perception of what you thought you knew. And it's helped me develop a more empathetic approach to helping people transform their life because of this experience that really humbled me. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. I know empathy is just so essential for people to understand or feel like they are understood, that you know where they're coming from. I love that. About how long was it between the time that you had that experiment and decided to package that story in a book?
So let's see. I started my journey in August or May of 2011, and I got the book deal around October after I went on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. I got a publisher, HarperCollins, reached out to me and said, "Hey, we want to do a book deal with you." And yeah, the book deal happened in about October of 2011. So and then we launched the book in, let's see, May of 2012 when I lost all the weight. So
Wow.
that's exactly when we launched. It was when I had lost the 75 pounds that I had gained, and that was in 2012.
Wow, so that was like really quick during or right after that journey. You were in the midst of it, just right after you lost it. When you thought about writing a book, I know a lot of health coaches, fitness experts, they have some like concerns about like too much time, they don't like to write, or just different fears. Did you have any hesitancy about writing a book at first?
That's a really good question. Yes, because it was so intimidating to me. I never once went into this experiment thinking, oh, my goal is to write a book, right? Like that wasn't even on my radar. I thought maybe the local news in Utah at the time would like would have me on their show or something like that. But I didn't know a book deal would happen. So it was very intimidating to work with a publisher and have deadlines and have a publicist to help me launch this book. And you have to understand, in 2011, the book publishing industry is totally different than what it is today. So I wrote a second book in 2019, and the landscape had completely changed. The game of how you become a New York Times bestseller had completely changed as well and had evolved. So I can even tell you from 2011 to 2019, it was completely different marketing strategy. And both opportunities taught me a lot about what it takes to go through a major publisher. Like HarperCollins is a major publisher here in the US. And I'll say I had a great experience with these publishing companies, but at the same time, like there was a lot of things that maybe I would have done differently, or I wish I had known some things about how it works
Like
and how
what?
you actually. So a lot of the marketing is on you as the author, and this is where even if you have a big publishing company, a lot of the marketing strategies are up to you to be successful. It's not just like even and also the advanced thing sounds really cool up front, but it's not. And even if you become a New York Times bestseller, a lot of people just automatically think that you are going to be rich from making having that status, but that can be further from the truth. So I wish I had a better marketing strategy in place in 2019. At least in 2011, it was the day and age where you could go on TV shows and people would buy your book. I think
Hmm.
nowadays that doesn't really happen. That doesn't really translate for most people. Um, so little things like that. And I wish I would have had, maybe a literary agent to help me negotiate these deals, because at the time I didn't have one, and I was just like, oh, this sounds like a good amount of money. Like, let's do it. Versus if I had had a literary agent kind of coaching me and teaching me, like, hey, well, here's what you need to get out of this, and here's how to monetize it better. I was oblivious to all of this. It's a whole new industry for someone that has no idea how it works. And
Yeah,
even today, I think it's continually evolving from what I hear from other authors.
that's absolutely true. It just seems like the promise or the expectation for many authors is, well, if I could just land a publishing deal, then they're going to take care of all this marketing. They're going to help me to get to bestseller and go so far, and it's going to translate automatically. And a lot of times people don't realize that even though you do get a book deal with a big publisher, you still are responsible for the marketing, and they're expecting you to do that. And then because you have a book, like the book isn't the end, it's the beginning. And there's incredible things that you could build when you learn the strategies of monetizing around a book and turning it into other products and programs, events, seminars, speeches. But just of its own, yeah, a lot of people have some misunderstandings of what actually working with publishers look like. So what would you say was it that helped to tip you over the edge, so to speak, to actually make the decision to write the book?
Honestly, for me, so a lot of people don't know this about me. When I was doing Fit to Fight to Fit and it was starting to go viral, I had a full-time job in the medical field at the time. And so this was a part-time thing I was doing on the side, this Fit to Fight to Fit experiment. And so a lot of people don't know that. And so when I made the leap to become an entrepreneur and do Fit to Fat to Fit full time, it came from the book deal, because of the advance was a significant amount of money to where I could be like, okay, I could take a year off of work and figure something out, take this salary, if you will, and have enough for about a year to kind of figure out how if I'm going to go in this direction. And so anyways, that was for me. That was the helped me make that leap of faith. And most entrepreneurs don't have that opportunity. And I will say that's what was different about me is I had something to fall back on. just in case. And a lot of people don't have that offer to, write to have an advance to write a book. Um, and so for me, but that was the decision that I, at the time with my wife, when I was married back then, we both kind of made that decision together, like, hey, let's just make this leap of faith. Let's take the advance. Let's write the book and see where this journey leads us. And that's ultimately what made the deal for me in 2011. In 2019, it was different because the advance wasn't as big. The landscape had changed, and you know, I went on zero TV shows during this when I wrote the second book. On the first, when I wrote the first book in 2011, it was like I went on so many TV shows and radio programs and podcasts. It was like a tour, if you will, like that I went on when I launched my first book. The second book was all up to me, and that's what was so hard. I was like, man, it's hard to get back on TV. It's hard to, make a name for yourself. But this is what I've realized is the power of TV. You'll get more exposure from, an ad going viral than you will from being on TV these days, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So it completely changed. I don't know if that makes sense to you or to the audience listening, but yeah, for me, that was my experience.
That does make sense. It makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting to hear that your turning point in your career as a fitness coach was really like that, writing that book opened the doors for you to go in full time in that regard. And I understand that you worked as a financial analyst for Chrysler and a neuromonitoring technician for spinal surgeries. I'm always fascinated by how principles are transferable from different seasons of our life. So, like, how would you say that your previous employments maybe prepared you for what you're doing now, perhaps in some unexpected ways?
That's a really good question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before. I think the financial analyst job, let's start with that because that was my first job right out of college, and I did that for 3 years. Um, Working in a corporate environment as part of a financial analyst team, working at an assembly plant in the middle of Illinois. I'm not really sure what that helped me with my job, other than creative thinking skills, like thinking outside the box. And that could have been the genesis of me thinking outside of the box with the idea of how can I gain a better understanding. And the idea of getting fat on purpose was something that was extreme, risky, but also attention grabbing. So those creative thinking skills could have come into play to help me out with that opportunity. Um, just because you like no one's really done this experiment. I mean, there was Morgan Spurlock who did Supersize Me. He actually just passed away today, out of
Oh,
all things.
wow, I
I don't
didn't
know if you
realize
knew.
that.
Yeah, he just passed away today from cancer. But that was kind of one experiment that his intention wasn't to gain weight necessarily. It was just to show how unhealthy McDonald's was and fast
Hmm.
food was, and he did it for 30 days. This experiment of Fit to Fat Fit, no one had really ever done before, except for maybe some actors who had got paid millions of dollars for movie roles. Um, and so it took some thinking outside of the box, right? And the fitness industry is so saturated with people. You have to find a way to differentiate yourself from all the other trainers that have six pack abs and muscles. So that's one aspect to it. Becoming a neuromonitoring technician, working in the OR with spinal surgeons, was a complete 180 of what I was doing from before. But I think the thing that I learned from that was having access to doctors and nurses. I remember telling them about this idea. There was some health perspective ideas that came from working in that industry of like monitoring certain types of blood work and hormone levels throughout my journey. Because some doctors were like, Drew, you shouldn't do this. It's unhealthy for you. And I was like, I know it's obviously unhealthy for you, but I rolled the dice with it. But I had some doctors and nurses kind of like, hey, make sure and test for this or test for that on your journey. Um, so I think that's kind of all that comes up for me. But that's a really good question that maybe would take some deeper thinking. But that's what, off the top of my head, that's what comes up.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, there's some things that you wouldn't usually think of, but I just love how a lot of times people think that it's like, oh, I'm starting completely from scratch and I have nothing to go by. But a lot of times I have found that it's like my favorite verse in the Bible is Luke 16:10. It says, if you're faithful in the little things, you'll be faithful in much. If you're unfaithful in little things, you'll be unfaithful in much. but it's like the faithfulness and the past seasons or responsibilities. A lot of times they translate, or there's some principles that prepare us to become the person who can think creatively or have the connections or have the asset that actually opens the doors in the future. And your health journey, Fit to Fat to Fit, it reminds me of like studying story structures, where Hollywood often has someone who's rich and successful who they lose everything and then goes from this rags of riches. And people love those stories. But in fact, I've seen some millionaires or billionaires like James Malinchuk's Secret Millionaire or Grant Cardone's Undercover Billionaire, where they manufacture an experience where they start from scratch and then try themselves to like make $1 million again. But your journey seems like a very health version of like the riches to rags to riches, but from fit to fat to fit. So like, in what ways have you seen that that having a unique story has helped you to gain traction in your business, and how important is that?
That's a really good question. And I kind of touched on it a little bit before of being in a saturated industry full of people that all look great. What makes you different? What's going to separate you from everyone else? And doing something that is risky, but also attention grabbing. Russell Brunson talks a lot about this, like the hook of the story is so important. And this fit to fat to fit idea was, I didn't know it at the time, but was the ultimate hook in the health and fitness industry, where here this personal trainer is going to give up his body and become obese on purpose and document the journey of gaining weight and then the journey of losing weight. And I think for people from a consumer perspective, it's like a train wreck that they can't look away from. Like they just like want to know, what is this guy doing? Why is he doing? I can't believe he's eating this food. And oh my gosh, his body is transforming. And that was kind of the brilliance, and I didn't know this at the time, of this concept. And that's why we turned it into a TV show, or we got very fortunate to turn it into a TV show where we put other trainers through this whole journey of fit to fat to fit, where they were able to go through that experience. And you saw, even though they had different experiences with it, overall it was a very similar journey of these fit trainers who had built an identity around their body looking a certain way, give up that identity, become obese. They freaked out. They had an identity crisis. They become sad and depressed, and they went through some emotional turmoil, if you will. And then they were able to help and inspire their client or other people watching the TV show to lose the weight, but with a different perspective and a more humble approach and more empathetic approach. And I think there's value in that. I think our society wants to see, someone that can relate to them, because I'll be totally honest with you, the fitness industry is full with a lot of judgment and a lot of misunderstanding. And a lot of people come from the camp of where I used to come from, which is kind of judgmental of like, why can't people just eat less and work out? It's not that hard. And in our minds, because if you've never been overweight, it's like, yeah, it's so simple. It's so easy. You just do this, this, and this. Kind of like someone who's figured out how to become rich. It's like, come on, guys, just, to make $1 million, you just sell X amount of, products per month to make $1 million, and then boom, you're a millionaire. But to your average person, they're like, you don't understand like where I'm coming from. And there's a good quote that I love by Teddy Roosevelt that says, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's really what fit to fat to fit is all about. Is you can have all the knowledge in the world as a personal trainer and helping someone with body composition and teaching them how to eat the right diet and move in a certain way to look to, manipulate their body composition to look a certain way. But none of that matters if you don't know how to connect to another human and make them feel heard and understood and seen and safe. There's value in having that empathy and developing that empathy that is an art form. I think our society with social media has lost the ability to empathize because we're so quick to judge based off of one social media post or someone's identity around politics or religion, and we just automatically label that person as this or this if you believe in this. And we're so quick to judge, and we lack so much empathy. And this is where I feel like if you can truly help someone feel understood and seen, and you truly make them feel cared about, they're more willing to listen to what you have to say because their defenses come down, and they're more willing to listen to the advice that you have, even though you might be right. That doesn't matter to the average person because they're just feeling judged and misunderstood by you, and there's no connection. Even if you have the best knowledge in the world. And so that's what I've learned from this whole experience is empathy is the key. And I think that fitness industry needs more empathy. I think this world needs more empathy.
Yeah, I completely agree. And especially with the rise of AI and deep fake, and where trust and faith is just disappearing in the world in videos. And it's amazing how many times I see things and I'm like, that's clearly AI generated. And there's other times where I see people doing amazing things and the comment, and I think it could be true, but people are just like, it's AI, it's fake. And there's so much need for authenticity and vulnerability. And I believe that deep human connection is going to be more desired than like in the future and now than it has been in any other age. So I totally love that approach of having that unique story, or that story that is able to really relate with the people that they're trying to help and who we want to help with. So that's really powerful. And in your book, you also talk a lot about the emotional battles that people must win to lose weight. And I'm thinking, like, what would you say are the emotional battles that health coaches need to win in order to grow their business? Because would you agree that there's also some emotional ties about money or marketing or content that kind of holds people back?
Yeah, I think there is, and that's a really good deep question, and it kind of ties into what I just talked about of no one caring how much you know until they know how much you care. And so I think people's ability to connect with their clients or know who their demographic is and know specifically who their avatar is and know how to connect with them and understand them, because sometimes people, health coaches, think they are their demographic, and in reality you're not. So you're putting out content that you think you would want to hear about or you would want to, listen to, when in reality your demographic, that's not the type of content that they're wanting to listen to. So you really have to tap into that type of person. What are they struggling with? And this is where getting to know people and understanding their story. There's a good quote by Brene Brown. She says it's really hard to hate people up close. And what she means by that is when you hear someone's story of why they are the way they are, you're probably less likely to judge them, and you'll probably be more willing to have empathy and understanding, like, oh, I see why you are the way you are. And there's a really good book that I also love by Oprah called What Happened to You. And in that book, her and Dr. Bruce Perry talk about reframing the question of, like, what's wrong with you to what happened to you. And that whole reframe of that question is so powerful, of understanding someone of, like, why are you the way you are? And let's go deep into why you are the way you are to better understand yourself. And that then will allow the health coach or the person coaching them to understand their struggles, their mental and emotional struggles of why they struggle with food. So instead of just judging them, like, why can't you just stay consistent with the meal plan? You just, like, we think humans are robots sometimes. Like, here's your macros, here's your calories, here's your supplements, here's your workouts, and you just do this thing and you show up every day. But we're emotional creatures, and our ability to do the physical stuff is determined by our mental and emotional states. So if you have a kid or kids that are driving you crazy, that demand a lot of your time and energy, you're going through relationship issues with your spouse, or financial or spiritual issues in life, and you're stressed out and you're overwhelmed, and then you also have to meal prep and count your macros and go to the gym, sometimes that is more, people see that as more overwhelming. And as a health coach, instead of just being like, just do it, no excuses, just push harder because that's what works for you, that's not really motivating or helping your client out. And so helping people feel seen and heard and understood. And I think your ability to get curious instead of judgmental about the person and why they do what they do is going to be powerful medicine to help that person lower their defenses and be like, you know what, this is why I'm struggling with things I'm struggling with. And it opens up more vulnerable and authentic conversations to where their defenses are down. They know it's a safe space to talk to you about what their struggles are, because you're not going to judge them. You're going to help them feel understood. And when they feel understood, they're going to be more willing to listen to what you have to say, because they know that you're not there to judge them. And like, sometimes as a health coach, it feels like they're going to confession of, like, oh, I got to check in with my health coach and I got to admit that I ate too many carbs today, and they're just going to yell at me. And so I'm just going to hide this part of it. And so I don't get in trouble. And I grew up in that mentality of, like, I don't want people to know my sin. So I'm just going to hide it and suppress it and just tell people what they want to hear so that we can just, move along. But ultimately, it leads to self-sabotage behavior. And so I think as a health coach, a couple things: your ability to one, be vulnerable with your clients, because vulnerability breeds vulnerability, but also getting curious and asking the right questions of why they are the way they are, and helping them build that self-awareness. And as they become more self-aware, they can start to control their reactions so much better. There's a good quote that I love by Anthony DeMello from the book Awareness, and he says, "What you're aware of, you're in control of, and what you're not aware of is in control of you."
Wow.
And so many people go through life unaware of why they do what they do. They have these built-in reactions to stress and overwhelm and triggers, and they don't really know where that comes from. They just react. And so sometimes that's with food, with drugs, with alcohol, with self-sabotage behavior, and they just react. And that's just built into their programming. When you become aware of why you react the way you react, like, oh, I react to stress and triggers with food and I self sabotage, the next time you're feeling triggered, you can take a step back before reacting and create space between the stimulus and the response. And the more space that you create, the more power you have to choose which path you want to go down. And so that's another tool that I think a lot of health coaches can teach their clients is how can we create space between the next time you're feeling triggered and you want to reach for the ice cream, and instead of just reacting where there's no space, you just react. How can we start to create space? Maybe that's a breathing technique, or maybe that's going for a walk, or maybe that's texting your coach before reacting, or
Mm.
talking to your spouse or your loved one, or whatever it is to help you create space. There's a lot of methods that I use as a health coach. Breath work is a really powerful one that I teach people in those moments of reactivity, to just take a few really deep breaths in through the nose and then out through the mouth and really slow it down. And that allows you to kind of calm your nervous system and self-regulate so that you're not reacting out of a fight or flight or sympathetic nervous system reaction where you're just like automatic and you're just yelling at your kids and you just like, give me the ice cream. I had a hard day. And we all do that from time to time, but the better you get, or the more self-awareness you have, the better you get at responding the way you want to. So sorry, that was a long answer, but hopefully that makes sense.
No, I mean, that's perfect. And I love speaking to people, coaches who have a strong understanding of the emotional connection behind our behaviors. I know one thing I have found is that I can either judge my client or I could get understanding and appreciate where they're coming from, but I can't do both at the same time. And that understanding, that curiosity, as you said, is so powerful because I've noticed sometimes my clients there, when they're talking about why they didn't do what they set out to do, or when they're talking about the real root issues of what's holding them back from, say, like marketing or recording that video or making that sales presentation, it's like you have to create this safe environment where they realize it's a judgment-free zone. And I know a lot of times, like I found for me, sometimes using self-deprecating humor, where I'll mention a time where I've been exactly in their shoe, or I share how like I was really afraid of speaking in front or recording content or speaking to highly influential individuals, and the fears and insecurities I had, and some of the silly, like, kind of make it humorous of the thoughts I had, not so much them, but knowing that they could relate. It helps to alleviate pressure. And I would say, like, because so much of getting other people results, and whether it's their health or their wealth, their body or their business, it involves addressing the emotions that hold people back. What advice could you give for connecting on that emotional level? Because it's so easy for health coaches to get into the steps, the structures, the science behind their health knowledge, but that doesn't always make an emotional connection. What tips could you give for resonating with people emotionally, whether that's through words in your book, social media, podcast interviews, when speaking on stages, like especially as far as the languaging or kind of phrases or questions that you can make to create that safe place?
That's a really good question. And here's my honest belief about that. And it's just my own theory, is that your ability to connect deep with someone else will only go as far as your ability to connect deep with yourself. And
I
so
believe
this is
that.
why I'm such a big proponent of doing the inner work to really put these things into practice with yourself. It's hard to have empathy for someone if you don't have empathy for yourself. it's hard not to judge someone if you constantly judge yourself. And so, in the book, The Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz talks a lot about how this life is a mirror of how we see ourselves. And so, if you're hateful, judgmental, resentful towards you and parts of you, you're going to look at the world through that lens, and you're going to unconsciously look at other people as sometimes hateful, judgmental, or resentful towards them, because everything you see is a reflection of how you see yourself. So that's why I've learned, like in his book, The Four Agreements, don't take anything personally. I've learned not to take anything personally when someone says something mean or bad about me, because honestly, that is a reflection of how that person sees themselves. So they could be having a bad day. They could have grown up in an environment that didn't have a lot of love and compassion and empathy, and they're just projecting that onto me. And instead of me taking it personal and taking in that poison, if you will, I've learned to just have empathy for that person, because I've developed empathy for those parts of me that I used to judge and I used to hate. And a lot of people think you can shame or hate yourself to transform parts of you, but that doesn't lead to lasting change. In order to truly transform, it has to be through love, self-love. And if you're not doing this inner work on yourself, it's hard to help someone else through that. So this is why I'm a big proponent of things like therapy, meditation, life coaching, journaling, positive affirmations, breath work, a gratitude practice every single day. For some people, religion; for other people, maybe things like plant medicine or whatever works for you to help you, become aware of your patterns and learn to have empathy for those parts of you that maybe you hate or wish didn't exist.
Hmm.
And then and only then can you have that empathy and compassion for your client. So it's one of those things where you have to like practice what you preach, and you have to put your money where your mouth is and actually do the work on yourself. Not just thinking, oh, this person needs to change or that person needs to change. How can I help them change? It's more of a reflection of like, how have I helped myself change? And what has helped me when I do the inner work, so that it's a reflection of how I project this onto other people. And that's why, for me, I'm a big proponent of, doing the inner work so that I can then, really truly help someone, because otherwise it's going to be inauthentic. It's one of those things where you can't really fake it. You have to like have that already developed within yourself, and having done the inner work really will manifest that onto those you're trying to help, if that makes sense.
I think that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of sound wisdom in what you're sharing there. And I appreciate you really connecting those dots, having been there and experienced that for yourself. I think that means a lot. Could you bring us back to a time of maybe one of the darkest parts of your experience in building a fitness brand, when you felt like maybe giving up? What was it that caused you to persevere and not quit?
Oh man, that's a really good question. So I've had my brand for 13 years, and a lot of people don't know the business side of it, the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, the ugly, because I don't always post about it. But there is definitely times where I've had to be like, you know what, I might need to get a job. I might need to walk away from this. Can I do this? And can I continue to do this? Here's where I've landed with that is I've learned that my identity is not wrapped up in Drew the fit guy. That used to be like a big part of who I was, or a big part of my identity when I first started, because I got a lot of praise and was going on all these TV shows, and it fed my ego. And when my ego is fed, it kind of fills that void temporarily of like, you feel happy and fulfilled. But as I've gotten older and wiser, I've realized that that is not the legacy I want to leave in this world. Drew the fit guy. That's cool. I love helping people. Will always love helping people. But for me, my legacy is something that's different. To where if fit to fit were to fail today, I know I would be okay. Because at the end of the day, the ones that matter to me the most are my daughters. So I'm a single dad. I have two girls that are 12 and 14. I really value being a present parent and a conscious parent to them. And at the end of the day, they could care less what I do for a living.
That's so true.
So, with that being said, there's definitely times where I've wanted to give up or quit, but I still feel called to do what I'm doing. And the only thing that has helped me get through this is this mantra that I learned maybe about a year and a half ago. And I learned it from listening to a podcast with Jay Shetty and Lewis Howes, where they were talking about this principle of high engagement, but low attachment. And what that means to me is I'm going to all I can control is how I show up every day. Every single day, I'm going to show up my best self to, make the business successful and do the things I need to do to monetize it and make the money and do the things I feel called to do. The things I can't control are the outcomes. I can't control if my video goes viral. I can't control if, people pay for my services. I can't control if this ends up being successful or that ends up being successful. All I can control is how I show up. And that's helped me let go of the need to have the outcome be the way I want it to be. Because at the end of the day, we can't control outcomes. And this is what I help people with on their health and fitness journey too, of like, you can't really control the number that shows up on the scale. That's just like a magic number that appears in that moment. You can control how much food you eat. You can control how hard you worked out. You can't control those things. But the number that shows up on the scale is just kind of like this magic number that pops up on the scale. And so that's really helped me show up my best self every single day, even if the results aren't what I want them to be. And this is so powerful for not just people on a health and fitness journey, but just on a life journey where we have these expectations of like, if I do X and Y, I want Z to happen. And if Z doesn't happen, then I'm a failure. But if it does happen, then I'm successful. And we put so much value on that to where it consumes us. But really, all we can control as humans is the input. We can't control the outputs. And that comes from the book Atomic Habits, which I think everyone should read, to better understand why it's important to control the inputs and let the outputs be what they are. But if you're doing the inputs and you're showing up, you're highly engaged to the process, most likely you're going to have successful outcomes. But still, even if the outcome isn't what you want it to be, you can go to bed, that night knowing that you did your best, and it is what it is. And so that's really what's helped me push through those hard times, those dark times, whether it's with my business or me as a single dad, or maybe like relationships not turning out the way I want them to, let go of that so that it doesn't consume me to where I self-sabotage and go back to old patterns and behaviors. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, and that's so true. It's one of the early lessons I learned from one of my first millionaire mentors in the health education business. Was he was saying that when you realize that every dollar you make in this health business represents a life that is transformed, or someone with their fitness who reached their goal, or a mother who's able to extend their life a little longer for their children. And so you look at money as the result of transforming lives and helping your clients to succeed with their health goals. And so if you could focus so much on helping them to reach their goals, then you don't have to worry. It's like you were saying, that magic number on the scale or that magic number in the bank account. It's just like there is transformation in the transactions, but you don't have to focus so much on the dollars. You can focus on helping your clients to succeed and reach their goals. And it's like a cause and effect relationship. Don't focus on the effect, focus on the cause that produces the effect. It makes such a big difference. And
Amen.
Another thing I understand that you have a bachelor's degree in business management and leadership, right? How helpful would you say that you found that degree in building your business to where it is today?
Ooh, that's a good question. When did I graduate? 2006 from college. I think it's helped in certain ways that maybe I'm unaware of. But you have to understand, like, I went from there into finance, and I would say the critical thinking skills is really what I took away from college. Was my degree, thinking outside the box, coming up with unique ideas of how to solve the problem instead of just the cookie cutter memorization approach that maybe sometimes you learn in public schools, right? But I'll be honest with you, I don't know how it translated to becoming an entrepreneur, because the world of entrepreneurship, especially what I do specifically, this job, this occupation, this industry did not exist 20, 30 years ago, really. Like, to be honest with you, it's not something that it's not like accounting or economics or, engineering. There's not a lot of track record of like, this is how you become successful. It's like, new. And so there's not really a degree that you could get that would really help you other than the critical thinking skills that you would get from maybe pushing yourself into like a bachelor's degree or working in finance or the medical field. Just being creative, thinking outside the box. I think that's really what I would say is that I've taken away from that, because other than that, college wasn't like, hey, here's how to work social media and here's how to become a successful entrepreneur in the fitness industry specifically. There was no roadmap or track record to copy from anyone else. To be totally honest with you, like the old people, like Jack LaLanne or these people who have been successful in the fitness industry in the past, or Richard Simmons, DVD sales, like that
Yeah.
kind of stuff doesn't exist anymore. So there's nothing really to learn from anyone. So we're all kind of just like, making it up as we go, because you have to understand too, the algorithms of social media have changed and evolved from 2011 to from where I started to 2024 of where we are today. It's a completely different ballgame where each year you kind of have to like relearn and renegotiate. Okay, how do I become successful? And to be honest with you, 13 years in, it's still a crapshoot. I still don't know what video is going to go viral. I still don't know which video is going to monetize, X amount of dollars. It's so hard to know because it's out of your control. So same thing, high engagement, low attachment, and that's kind of how I have to live my life. And I don't know if I learned that from my bachelor's degree, back in 2006. But I will say, I think it's just the critical thinking skills that maybe I've taken from then and has evolved to where I am today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know for me personally, I had a hard time paying attention in school or seeing the particular. I've been called a utilitarian before, and I think that resonates where I like the function of things, and I'm a very like just in time kind of information learner, and I like to apply what I learn. And my challenge in high school was like, when am I going to use this information? And for so many times, like I actually ended up dropping out of high school so I could pursue my career as a professional health speaker, because there was so many
Yeah.
opportunities opening up as a teenager to travel around the nation and do health seminars. Because like I had a heart attack when I was 12, and I was able to lose 50 pounds, and I was borderline diabetic, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and I was faced with a decision. I had to make a radical shift, and people wanted to hear my story, and I realized, wow, I can get paid for actually sharing a story that I would gladly do for free. And I realized that my career choice didn't really require a high school diploma or college degree. So just for me personally, I found that my education actually skyrocketed when I dropped out and went into YouTube University and started to learn things that it's like, I need a website. How do I do that? I need to record videos. How do I do that? Create content and some of those things. And really much of what I've learned is through mentors and people in the industry who are further along than I am and who I could like shadow or learn from or assist in different capacities. And so, I mean, I do see that there's a lot of value that people can get from some of the formal education, but one thing that kind of perplexed me for a while until I heard Russell Brunson explain it, he resonated with that story, and he realized that school is more so like preparing people to be employees to work in a system or like factories or some corporations, but where they're not really training to be entrepreneurs, they're training to be employees. And when you have like that entrepreneur DNA, to serve and to have a movement or a business, or it's like a different skill set. And so I could relate to some of the things you're sharing as well.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, and I think it's so true. And I see a lot of videos nowadays of like college is a scam and things like that. And I think for some people it is, and maybe for others it's not. Maybe there's value in it if that's what the route they want to go. But we live in a day and age that, like I said, has never really existed, where you could create a YouTube channel and monetize it. I think that the most successful YouTuber was under 10 years old a couple years ago or something. And so we live in a day and age where you can come up with an idea, and it's so easy to be an entrepreneur nowadays. It's still hard, but it's more opportunities than there ever has been. Of like, I have an idea, I'm going to monetize it, and you could easily do that nowadays. And I think that didn't exist for our parents or our grandparents. Like that's so foreign to them. But to us, it's so prevalent. And yeah, you don't need a formal education to become a successful YouTuber or influencer these days. And I think there's no formal education that could teach you what you can learn from just, getting into, learning how social media works and learning from other entrepreneurs and networking and going to masterminds. It sounds like you're a walking story of that. And by the way, congrats on your 50-pound weight loss. That's not easy. You look great, by the way.
Thank you. I
So
appreciate it.
yeah, easy.
So, do you mind if I ask you some rapid fire questions? I got 4 of them for you.
Do it.
Okay, and then after that, I'll ask 2 more and we can end. So, rapid fire. Question 1. How difficult do you see that your journey would have been? Or what would it have cost your business and your mission if you never wrote a health book?
That's a good question. I don't think I would have had the base of legitimacy that I got from being on all those TV shows had I not had the book. Because back in 2011, the landscape of the book industry was different to where people valued books, and so I was able to go on TV shows because I was launching a book. Had I not had a book, I probably would not have had access to. Because here's what happened really quick. When I did Fit to Fat to Fit, the first round of TV shows that I went on was just because the virality of this personal trainer is getting obese on purpose. But that was a one-time thing. And then if I didn't have the book, I wouldn't have been able to go back on the shows to like when I lost all the weight. But because I had the book, it opened up so many more opportunities. Does that make sense? So I think that built that legitimacy of like Drew Manning, Fit to Fit. He's been on Dr. Oz, Good Morning America, The View, Dr. Drew. And that built that legitimacy of like, oh, this is a real guy. This is a real thing that he's done. And it's got a lot of notoriety and attention. And the book became a New York Times bestseller, which, like I said, that doesn't guarantee you're a millionaire or make a lot of money from it, but it's a label, an accolade that's like, okay, this guy's legit. So definitely helped me. I'll be totally honest with you, for sure.
That makes sense. Yeah. And today, media, I always tell my clients that being an author puts the author in authority, and it really does differentiate as podcasts, media, speaking engagements. They prefer people who have a book and that legitimacy that comes with it. So next question too. What is one of the best investments you've ever made in growing your health business? Was it a coach, a book, sales rep, mentor, or anything you can think of?
Best investment. I think the biggest thing that helped me grow my brand was the right marketing company that knew how to take my message and my voice and my image and build an ad strategy around that. Because I'll tell you this really quick. I know this is rapid fire, but this leads to so many more stories. After I went on all the TV shows and launched my book in 2012, it kind of died off. And from 2012 to 2016 was kind of like figuring it out, like going from company to company, getting sponsorship deals, not really sure where I was going from there until about 2016. I got introduced to a marketing team who I would say, honestly, I made more money and got more exposure than I did from going on all those TV shows, combined with the right marketing team that knew how to create an ad strategy around my brand, to where, I don't know if you know who Thomas DeLauer is, but we were we kind of like when keto became hot and was like at the peak, it was me and Thomas DeLauer on like Facebook ads. And this is back before Facebook would restrict, so much who got this. Like, I got more exposure from that. My brand grew, I don't know how much more, but it grew so much. For example, I had 60,000 Facebook followers in 2012 after all the TV shows that I went on. And then after I was with this company, it got me to over 1 million.
That's awesome.
That's what I'm saying, is the power of the right marketing team really elevated my brand to a whole nother level.
Yeah, I can totally see that, because a lot of times health experts, they know the body, they know fitness, they know health. But when it comes to like monetizing that health knowledge, getting paid a price for your advice, it's marketing skills. It's not the degrees, it's not the certifications. If they don't have the marketing, then it's going to be hard to get your message to the masses. So that's awesome. Question 3. when it comes to selling books, what method would you say has been responsible for more book sales than anything else? And what would you say was just a waste of time for you?
Mm, that's a really good question. I would say the method that's helped me sell more books, honestly, is I think social media marketing has helped me sell more books. And I think, honestly, I didn't do a great job. Like I know people like Russell Brunson and Tim Ferriss and these other, big name authors, they really use the book isn't like to sell books isn't the goal.
Mm-hmm.
The book is kind of like the hook or like, hey, buy the book, but then come into my coaching program or buy this high ticket offer or become my consumer and purchase my products. The book is just like the hook. And I think that's really, I wish I would have known that better, like a better
Mm-hmm.
strategy to do that, where I wish I would have, that would have led to more book sales had I been able to run ads more effectively, to where like maybe even giving me the book plus free shipping or something like that. Or yeah, or like the book is free but like $5 shipping.
Yeah.
That strategy I think would have worked great. Um, but so my second book wasn't a New York Times bestseller. So just what was the second part of your question though?
Oh, what would you say has been just a complete waste of time?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think there's anything that's a complete waste of time because I think at the end of the day, it's all about exposure. Like even yeah, I would do podcasts with podcasts no one has ever heard of, and I got that strategy from Gary Vee of like just do every podcast, say yes to every podcast. And even though like it didn't move the needle, and as far as book sales go, you don't know how many consumers come on or people like love your message and start consuming your content after that. So and maybe led to some book sales down the road. It led to new audiences and new exposure. So I can't think of anything as a waste of time, to be totally honest with you. But I think there's definitely some strategies that would be more bang for your buck, and you probably have more knowledge about that than I do. So I don't have a lot of yeah. Sorry, these aren't the best rapid fire answers to your rapid fire questions.
No worries, it's totally fine. I've enjoyed our conversation. Last question, rapid fire questions. What opportunities has your book opened for you, your business, relationships, or otherwise, and maybe some surprising ways that you didn't expect?
Yeah, speaking engagements, and I would say podcast opportunities, big name podcasts that I've been on, and being invited to like big networking events because I have the book and the brand and the legitimacy behind it. So yeah, I would say yeah, being hired to speak. I think just recently what's been really cool is I have my first international speaking gigs, or not my first, but I have three scheduled this year where I'm going to Australia, Spain, and Norway, and possibly more after that. But
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I think it's because of having the book as a selling point, because people go to these events sometimes wanting to buy a book, and I think
Mm-hmm.
they want to hear from the author of a book. And I think it adds more legitimacy to your brand had I not written a book. Does that make sense?
Makes
So
perfect sense.
yeah.
And event planners, meeting planners love authors because it makes them look better and their event look better. And one thing that you may or may not consider is sometimes if people are paying to attend an event, you could include in the contract that you can give them, let's say there's 3,000 people at the event, you can give them like 1,500 books for free as part of your speaker's fee, and then it encourages them to go pay for another 1,500 books, and so they can give them to everyone who is in the audience. Or if they charge like $50 per ticket, then and your book is say like $10, then they could charge $60 per ticket and cover the cost of the book, and everyone gets it at registrations. There's different ways to do a lot of bulk book orders through speaking, but event planners, they love authors.
And that's happened before multiple times where I've negotiated, a higher price point for my speaking gigs because I have a book to sell. Like, hey, what if we wrap this into because it adds more value. It adds more value to the people there listening. Like, hey, here's Drew's speech. You loved it. Awesome. We're gifting you with a free copy of his book, and you can line up and take a picture with him, and he'll sign it for you. And I think people love that at these types of events, and that's happened many times because I have a book.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Second and last question. Imagine you were in a hospital sitting on your deathbed and you knew you had 5 minutes to live, but I gave you an opportunity to speak into a microphone and you knew this microphone would broadcast to every person on earth. What final words would you leave to our audience?
Wow, man. This is going to be more on the emotional side of things.
Perfect.
I think for me, what I would say is that everyone listening is worthy as they are and they're lovable. And I think if everyone truly believed that deep down, it would change the way they view themselves. It would change the way they show up for themselves, and it would change the way they view others and treat others. If all of us really, truly, deep down believe that we are worthy of love, we are worthy of success, we are worthy of the highest, most healed version of you, you are worthy to become that. And I think the feeling of being loved is the motivation to do the hard work that's required to become that highest, most healed version of you. And I think a lot of people struggle with that worthiness of like, I'm not worthy to be loved. I'm not worthy to be physically healthy. I'm not worthy to do the hard, uncomfortable things that we know are required. A lot of people struggle, I think, because maybe they weren't loved the way they needed, and they don't know how to give themselves that love now that they're older in life. And I think if everyone truly believed that deep down, this world would be a different place because we show up for ourselves differently when we love ourselves and we believe we're worthy of all the good things that this world has to offer. And that's what I would say.
Wow, that's awesome. I got some goosebumps as I listened to you, or as Jim Quick says, truth bumps. Like I can relate too, because for like being born out of wedlock and not being raised with my dad in the picture, it's like sometimes I like throughout the years I've too struggled with like, well, maybe I'm unlovable or I'm broken or I'm a mistake because maybe it wasn't planned, or and so those they do show up in different areas when we have goals, and that feeling of like not being able to be accepted or loved is definitely challenging, and that's been a part of my healing journey. And so I love those words that you say. I agree wholeheartedly that it could impact the world. The world would be a better place if we all believe that. So last question, if our listeners want to connect more with you, what's the best way to learn more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, they can reach out to me on social media, which all my social media handles are the same. It's just fit number two, fat number two, fit. And you could just hit me up on Instagram. It's probably the one I'm most, active on is Instagram. I mean, it's the name of my book and my website and my podcast. So that's probably the best way to get a hold of me if you want to reach out to me or ask me questions about, how I can serve people or help people.
That's awesome. Thank you, Drew. And that's exactly how I reached out to you too. I appreciate your willingness to get on the show and help other health coaches in this industry. I've thoroughly enjoyed our interview and appreciate your time coming here today.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Enoch. Hope
Absolutely.
you care.